And I miss Weston because he's not here for the intro. But hello, everybody. Today is Thursday, May 14th. This is MS National Office Hours. My name is Heather Cox.
Hey everybody, I'm Dwayne.
Dwayne is the answerer, and I am the hostess. But we are very excited to have Dr. Matthews with us, and I want to especially thank her because she was scheduled to present before, and then her school has some restrictions, and they were like, sorry about your luck, you're going to need to wait. But she didn't give up on us, and she went back, she got the appropriate permissions, and so she is now here with us, and we're so appreciative of that. And so she is going to tell us what's been going on. All right, we're going to turn our cameras off. The show is all yours.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen real quick. Okay, can everybody see that?
Looking good.
All righty. Well, thank you, Heather, for inviting me. So my name is Suzanne Matthews. I'm a professor of computer science at West Point. And what I'm hoping to do today is to talk to you a little bit about how we are empowering our students to learn about AI with Microsoft 365 Copilot. Since a lot of you seem like Copilot experts, bear with me if some parts of this is kind of boring. But I hope that everybody gets something about, a little bit about what we're doing. So a little bit about AI 105, which is the course I'm in charge of. So we have been teaching computing at West Point in some form for close to 60 years. In fact, it has been 60 years because 1965 was the first time it became mandatory for all freshmen to learn about computing. And so I have a picture here of a classroom in 1965. This is a satellite classroom where students are dialed into the GE 225 that was in my department area. So where my office is actually where the giant computer used to be back in the day. As you can imagine, with us teaching computing for about 60 years, the material understandably has had to evolve over time. And so in 1965, everybody learned how to program in Fortran. And over the years, programming has been the foundational way that we have introduced students to computing. So we switched from Pascal to Ada to Java. And then in 2018, we switched over to Python. And Python has been our primary language ever since. So around 2023, we found ourselves in the same place that I think most colleges found themselves, where we had the widespread availability of free large language model clients in the form of web apps like ChatGPT. And all of a sudden, we were all trying to deal with the fact that our students are using these and how do we adjust our courses. So I was made course director of what is now called AI 105 back in fall of 2023. And since then, I've been evolving this course. And in last fall, so fall of 2025, that was the first time that we have launched AI 105. So our goal really is to ensure that all our students are what I call AI ready. And what that means is that they have to be knowledgeable about LLMs, how they kind of work, what they can do with them, and most importantly to me, that they need to be aware of data and privacy issues. I think this would be a lot easier if students didn't know anything about LLMs, but that's not true. We make the assumption that all of our students have had some exposure to LLMs and they actually have used GenAI in some way prior to coming to West Point. We also assume that they have picked up several bad habits along the way, including which LLMs they use, and some bad assumptions, specifically treating these as magic boxes and oracles, which serves no one's interests in terms of making those assumptions. Since we have always taught people about computing by teaching them how to code, we continue to do that in this course. However, we have, in addition to coding, we also introduce them to teaming with GenAI. And using that basic knowledge of coding to then evaluate that GenAI output. Because I personally believe that if you're going to generate things with code and you don't know what that code is doing, it's really not going to serve anyone well. I also think we have to treat these students as beginners, and they need to be have very intentional introductions to the tools and their use. Okay, so I was really excited when I learned about Microsoft 365 Copilot. And even though my students are free to use whatever LLMs they want, I have been very deliberate in telling them that if they are going to use a LLM by default, it should be Microsoft Copilot. So why do I do that? So once again, like I said, our students are beginners. And one thing I forgot to mention, that since this is a required course, it's taken by all freshmen. About 97% of our students are not going on to be computer science majors or cybersecurity majors. So these are just people who are going to be learning regardless, what they want to study at West Point, but they are required to take this course. And so we really have an opportunity to teach them how to use LLMs correctly. And this is a great opportunity for us to kind of steer them in the direction of particular LLMs to use. So when you're using Microsoft Copilot, you're a user, you're sending data and prompts to Microsoft 365 Copilot chat. I should also mention that we have just the free tier of Microsoft 365 Copilot chat. I was excited about Microsoft 365 Copilot chat because Microsoft is our cloud provider. And so we have Copilot chat for free. And when people send things to Microsoft Copilot chat, the application has its ability to ground its information based on data that is on either the user's computer or that they upload. And then they use that to add context to whatever prompt the user put in. And that grounded information gets sent to a large language model that is residing on Azure. And this is really exciting for me because I think when students, especially, or I would say even staff, when they're new at using LLMs, they tend to be a little careless about how they share data, and they might have a tendency to overshare. By using Microsoft 365 Copilot, we keep the data within this Microsoft 365 service boundary, which means it does not leave that boundary, the data boundary set by the service agreement. And that is really, really good for data protection. As I think Greg mentioned, Claude is now something that is available through Copilot. And so having access to those models running on Azure servers means that that data, again, does not leave the Microsoft 365 service boundary. Compare that to a public-facing LLM. Basically, if you send data or prompts, there is no guarantee what happens to that data or that prompt. It can be retained later for future training. It can be stored in a data center halfway around the world. If those data centers get hacked, that data is out there. You have shared, and therefore you have released control over that data. And that is bad for several reasons. I will quickly remind you of it could even be due to things like software bugs. So when ChatGPT, not to pick on them, had their share link feature, they essentially that got indexed on Google search. So people were able to go and actually see all these shared ChatGPT logs, and some of them had some pretty, I would say, unsavory use cases being used. So that was kind of embarrassing. The other thing we like to, impress upon our students is that public-facing LLMs really have access to the surface web, and that is really a very small percentage of the internet. Most of the useful information we need is actually located on the deep web. So treating these things as magic oracles that always know the right answer is not great. And it's very inaccurate because the actual amount of data that they have available to them by default is just located on the surface web. So how do we introduce students to Copilot. Everything I'm about to show you is available for free. And, so you don't need the enterprise account in order to do what I'm about to show you. So the first thing is using Copilot Edge. So if you open up your Edge browser, you're going to see this little Copilot icon in the corner. And so what I'm showing you here is an excerpt from our textbook. This is stuff that I wrote. It is in the deep web. It is accessible only by me and other people who have access to the book through an account. But by clicking that button, I can actually generate a quiz based on the content of this book. And likewise, my students can go to any page on the textbook and essentially click on that button and then generate quizzes on their own. And this works by that same grounding process that I was talking about. So essentially, the Copilot Edge agent is grabbing the information on that page and then using that as its primary way of grounding. And so this is one way we encourage our students to study. The second thing is we encourage them to use Copilot to understand institutional citation requirements. So like most colleges, we require our students that if they're going to use AI, they have to actually cite the AI and describe how they used it. And also in my course, I actually require them to provide a full transcript of the conversation as well. So we have institutional documents that describe this. And essentially, my students, this is one of the in-class exercises I show them. We have them upload these institutional documents. And then they can describe a scenario saying, hey, here's someone I asked for help on. Does this count as assistance or collaboration? And how do I cite this? And again, using that same process of grounding, it is getting the necessary information from these documents. This is not possible from a web search, and actually giving contextualized replies on how to properly cite this person, where to cite. So they have to do an acknowledgement page entry and inline code citations, and showing them exactly how to do this. The next thing we do is we actually have our students build their own tutors ahead of the programming unit. So a lot of institutions, the instructor builds a tutor, and then that instructor may share that tutor with all the other students in their course. And this is nice, except that once the students leave the course, they lose access to the tutor. And two, they don't really understand necessarily how that tutor works. So we thought, or specifically I thought, that if our students built the tutors themselves, they would be able to, one, kind of take away that little bit of a curtain and kind of reveal how these things work a bit better. And also they can adapt this to actually learn how to build their own tutors for whatever courses or that they might do, or even when they leave the institution and they go somewhere else, how can they build their own tutors or helpful agents to basically help them in whatever task. So, So I use the Create Agent feature in Copilot. And essentially, I give them detailed instructions on how to do this, and I also provide them with a system prompt. And this is the stuff that, as an instructor, I can do. I know what the context of my course is. I know what topics are, covered and what are not. And so I provide the students with this, and then using that and telling them exactly how they should, enable the code interpreter and stuff, they're able to build this Python tutor. And as I mentioned, they use this tutor in advance of our programming unit. So we build this, and then they have full permission to use the tutor to help them as they are learning programming. So again, because this is an agent, it is using that system prompt and kind of prepending that system prompt to whatever the user types. So that way that is contextualized feedback to the LLM, and it also ensures that in long conversations, the the agent doesn't lose its context. So here is a common Python question that if you try and type in Google, you'll get a different response. So, specifically, what does the percent sign do, the percent operator do? And so the tutor correctly says that it is the modulo operator, and then explains how it works, and then offers the students some opportunities to actually practice their understanding of the modulo operator. And they can just ask this tutor whenever they want, questions about Python. And so again, this is free because it doesn't cost anything for the students to actually build their own tutors, and it helps them understand a little bit better how these things work. All right. The other thing I will say is that I do enable the students to basically choose what LLMs they want to use. Part of this is that in earlier iterations, I tried to say, yes, this is the only thing you're going to use, but then the students will kind of secretly on the side try and look at other LLMs. So I thought, all right, instead of prohibiting the use of other LLMs, let me see if I can be very explicit on how to correctly use LLMs. So we encourage them to always look for tutor modes. So there's guided learning in ChatGPT or in Gemini, and there is this tutor mode in ChatGPT. We tell them how to ask AI specifically for help on for code, so that way the solution isn't automatically spit out. We show them exactly how to create links to conversations, so that way when they do their citations, we have less problems with students' understanding. So, so here are some other things that we do. So the next thing I do is just make sure, okay, is making sure the students are very mindful about what LLMs they choose. So we have this whole privacy and data literacy mini course that was created in conjunction with our library. So that way, when a student sets out to do a task, they should say, what are the parameters of my task? And based on this, what are some of my the data and privacy concerns, and then what LLM should I choose based on that task? We also have them do something called a digital footprint audit, where they are asked to request their data from at least one LLM source and also some social media sources. And then they actually look at that data and analyze it and reflect on what exactly is being collected. And also think about how a threat actor could cherry pick information to create a negative profile on them. And then, really ask themselves, is the cyber persona that is reflected in this data an actual reflection on who they are as individuals, and is that what they want to be reflected? And the content in this is actually reinforces the material that we cover in our GenAI lab, where we talk about prompt engineering, grounding, and also how information is shared in public-facing LLMs. Our cyberspace and threat actors lesson, where we talk about different types of threat actors and malware, our online tracking and ethics lesson, and our lesson on cyber hygiene. We also have several teaming opportunities throughout the course. So in addition for teaching them about LLMs and our programming unit, we then have plenty of opportunities for them to actually practice using LLMs to generate code and accelerate that process. So, we do some multimodal problem decomposition with GenAI, where students actually map out a game using a flowchart, and then they can use the multimodal features like the camera, for example, to actually build out that game. We use prompt chaining to help them build a website with tracking elements. And we have a GenAI Wireshark lab. And the purpose of both is to show how threat actors with very little technical expertise can actually build and learn, build, web infrastructure with tracking elements, or, analyze something like a PCAP file, again, with very little technical knowledge. And we also teach them about the proper ways to analyze data how you shouldn't necessarily put your data into the LLM to analyze it, but that if you can get the LLM to generate the code, you should then be able to do that analysis locally. And we also talk about chain of thought instead of just accepting what an LLM says, actually asking it to explain out how it reached that conclusion to help as another data point to help you reflect on whether that is accurate information or not, and along with techniques like lateral reading. We also have two main major teaming events in the course. There is the robotics lab and the AI final project. Just briefly about the robotics lab, this is pretty cool. We have this Bluefruit device, and the students spend about 3 days building this little temperature sensor and learning how to program it. And even though it's not shown here, there is like a little fan that is shown. And then for our GenAI activity, what we do is we just show students this video. There is no audio, no description, nothing. It is just a little game. And I'll tell you briefly what it does. It's basically, there's a little dot, which is kind of like on a pan. And as you move the device in either way, the accelerometer will actually move the dot to the corresponding position. And so if the dot were to hit the side of the screen, the game will end, the device will flash red and say game over, and then tell how long your little dot stayed alive for. So I'm telling you all of this, but they know nothing of this. They're just observing the video. And in that, they then have to decompose the functionality of this and then basically reverse engineer the game using GenAI. And so this is another way in which we kind of teach them problem solving and problem decomposition, which becomes even more important in the age of GenAI. There is also the AI final project. And so this is our main capstone event in the course. I introduced this the first semester that I was course director. The goal is that students need to team with GenAI in a way to basically create something that neither they nor the AI could do by itself, and then basically reflect upon that experience through a write-up. And we got some really, really cool projects that first semester. So these are all images from that first semester that we did it. This experience was summarized in a paper that was published in SIGSI 2025. So if you're interested in learning more about it, the citation information is here. And we were really excited. We couldn't believe just some of the cool things our students came up with. But last year, when we redid this, we started seeing what I just call artwork creep, where you still have a small group of students who just really want to take the easy way out. And so they'll pick what I would say is probably whatever they think is easy, like, oh, I want to learn how to knit with AI. And it's like, okay. And essentially, we saw what I would say was a degradation in the quality of projects. So this last year, when we officially reincarnated this AI 105 and started deliberately teaching prompt engineering, I should say what you're seeing here, we did not deliberately teach prompt engineering. We got rid of the art category entirely, and we gave them 3 options. They can create a game, they can do some sort of data analysis where they download a large data set off of the web and then use AI to create some sort of data dashboard, or they can use a hardware project. And this is kind of some of the projects we got just in the last semester. And you can kind of see they're really, really cool. And I think one of the really cool things about this project is that every 6 months, the models continue to get better. So the standards of what a good project is just continues to raise. And the ease at which the students are able to create like these very seemingly professional things it just increases just how easily they can do these. So the goal here is not just to say, oh, create something cool, but we are really assessing them on the strength of their documentation, the prompt engineering techniques they use, and the reflection on what they learned. And we really noticed a marked improvement in the quality of prompting in these projects. So to kind of summarize, there were many advantages of using Microsoft 365 Copilot. I hope one thing that I show you is that there's a lot you get for free. I should add that the projects that I showed, I would say a small portion of them were actually created in Copilot, because we really do give the students the opportunity to pair with whatever AI they choose for that final project. I think training students to use Copilot means better data protection of college resources. And for me, this is the big thing about why I was really interested in having our students use Copilot, and why I think most colleges that have Microsoft as their enterprise cloud provider should be using Copilot, because it really helps with that data protection piece, which is very crucial and not stressed nearly enough. And Microsoft is a known quantity. There's a lot of other companies that are saying, oh yeah, we can be compliant and everything. And I don't know, I mean, our organization has been working with Microsoft for like 30 years. They're known. We trust Microsoft. I'm not sure I would trust some of those other companies. Some other things, though, is that students are not in the habit of using multiple LLMs. And actually, many of them are very attached to the original LLM that they used, which is largely ChatGPT. So if you take a look at some of our preliminary data, we still see a large amount of use of third-party LLMs like ChatGPT. And when we asked why, it's because it's what they're comfortable with. And students often want the easiest possible solution, not the best. And if they get frustrated with an LLM, that will hinder their adoption. So for us, the lack of an easy way to cite Copilot or use like our AI 105 tutor, that has hindered some of the adoption of our tutor. However, we have found that education can influence what LLM students use and how they choose to use those LLMs. So you can kind of see from this data that, while, maybe the amount of usage has increased a bit, the method of which they use the LLMs have actually greatly increased over time. And lastly, the digital footprint audit was extremely eye-opening for students, and that really drove home on just the amount of data that is collected on them, and helped reinforce their decisions to change how they will use LLMs and social media. And that's all that I have for today. Thanks again to Heather and Darren of Microsoft for kind of giving me the opportunity to present here, my leadership team, and the other faculty who do research with me. And I forgot to say, all the views in this presentation are only mine and do not reflect my organization or the U.S. Army. So, but thank you. I will take your questions.
That is awesome. Does anybody have any questions first of all, thank you, Dr. Matthews. We love to see what is actually being done. I think that, we can talk all day and we answer questions or we show random things that we have, but like seeing it out there and how it's being used, and that's the best. Does anybody have any questions? Maybe not. They got all the answers they need. Oh, Glynis. Okay.
Yes. Dr. Matthews, that's incredibly impressive what you've designed and are delivering. I'm curious to hear about the students' response in terms of sort of their feedback around that process of going through. So I suppose you have your end of semester feedback, and be interesting to hear what you're getting.
So I haven't looked through all of the feedback yet, because my final was literally 2 days ago, and I've been questioning my decisions on having this the same week as finals. But just anecdotally, our students have really enjoyed the course. I think the learning how to use AI has really been eye-opening, learning how they're being tracked, especially in some of the cybersecurity implications, especially around LLM use. And so how to safely use these things have been very impactful. So I think overall they seem to like it.
Yeah, I think that experiential experience and how the reflections are really valuable, and I think will add to better outcomes. So yeah, no, brilliant. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, all right. Well, on that note, we will say thank you one final time. We so appreciate that you stuck with us, got permission to come back, and hopefully we'll get to hear some more. We would love to hear how things evolve, or if there's a second iteration of things, feel free to come back and give us an update. That would be incredible. But for now, we will say good night to everybody. And we look forward to seeing you again next week. Bye, y'all. Have a great night.
See everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Everyone.